26 years old when I started working the night shift at a 24-hour diner in Omaha, Nebraska. The place was near a busy highway, but during the early morning hours, business slowed down a lot. It was the kind of small diner with overly bright lighting, the constant smell of burnt coffee, and low music repeatedly playing the same old playlists. I usually worked alone between midnight and 6 in the morning because almost no customers came in at that hour besides truck drivers, students, or people leaving bars. The owner of the place said it was safe because the area had a gas station, a 24-hour pharmacy, and a few stores open nearby. Even so, working alone overnight naturally made anyone more alert. My routine was practically always the same. I arrived at 10 at night, organized the counter, cleaned the machines, and spent hours serving only a few people until sunrise. Normally, I closed my register around 5:30 in the morning and walked alone to the back parking lot where I left my car. The parking lot was small and partially hidden behind the building. There wasn't much lighting besides a yellowish lamp near the employee entrance. For months, I never had any problems working there, until I started noticing one specific customer who appeared almost every night. The first time I noticed him was because he showed up 3 times in the same week. White man, maybe late 30s, thin, short, unkempt beard, and always wearing a dark jacket even when it wasn't that cold. He sat alone at the same counter spot near the window and ordered the exact same thing every time. Large black coffee and a slice of apple pie. At first, he just seemed like a normal customer trying to talk because he was alone overnight. He asked my name, made comments about the weather, normal things like that. I answered politely because it was literally part of the job. But after a few days, I started noticing that he stayed far too long without really doing anything. Sometimes he sat there for more than 2 hours, barely touching his phone and staring out the window toward the parking lot. And the strangest part was that he always showed up close to the time when I started cleaning and partially closing the diner before sunrise. One night, he casually commented that I looked tired because I probably didn't sleep much getting home almost in the morning. That immediately made me uncomfortable because I had never mentioned my schedule outside of work. Even so, I tried to ignore it. Working with the public means hearing weird comments all the time. But in the following days, he started knowing increasingly specific details about my routine. One early morning, he asked whether the walk to the parking lot still scared me as much as before. I remember exactly how I felt hearing that because my hands literally stopped moving while I cleaned the coffee machine. The problem wasn't just the sentence. It was the fact that I truly hated walking alone to the back parking lot at that hour. But I had never mentioned that to him, or to almost anyone. I forced a nervous laugh trying to act normal and asked what he meant. He calmly answered that you could tell by the way I always looked around before leaving. Then he smiled like it was an innocent observation. From that night on, I started feeling watched at work all the time. Whenever he appeared, I automatically became more tense. The worst part was that he never did anything directly threatening. He never raised his voice, never touched me, never said anything explicitly wrong. He just knew too many details. Another early morning, he commented that I usually left a few minutes later on Thursdays because it took me longer to close the register. Another time, he asked whether my car was still making that weird noise when it started. The moment I heard that, my stomach turned cold because my car really had been having engine problems for 2 weeks, and that meant he was probably watching me in the parking lot after I left work. I started asking the morning cook to arrive earlier just so I wouldn't have to leave alone. Some days it worked. Other days, I still ended up walking to the parking lot alone because he arrived late. I thought about telling my manager about the customer, but honestly, I didn't know how to explain it without sounding paranoid. A strange man knows details about my schedule. It didn't seem like enough. Besides, part of me still wanted to believe maybe they were coincidences, but then I started noticing something else. His car, an old dark sedan that almost always stayed parked far from the lights in the front parking lot. Sometimes I saw the car before he even entered the diner, and on some nights it simply remained parked outside long after he had left. That started making me genuinely nervous. I began repeatedly checking the diner doors during my shift and avoided looking directly at him when he talked to me. Even so, it seemed like he noticed every change in my behavior. One early morning, while handing me money for the coffee, he quietly said something I still remember perfectly to this day. "You should stop checking your mirrors so much while driving home. It makes it look like you're expecting someone to follow you." The moment he said that, a horrible cold sensation shot through my entire body because that wasn't something someone could just guess. I really had been doing that every morning ever since I started suspecting him. After that night, I started genuinely panicking before every shift. My entire routine changed. I started asking for rides whenever possible, parking in different spots, and even leaving through the front entrance instead of the employee door just to vary the path to my car. Even so, it felt like he always knew exactly what I did. And the worst part was that he kept showing up almost every night as if nothing was wrong. Always the same order: large black coffee and apple pie. Always sitting near the window looking toward the parking lot. Once I noticed he didn't even finish the coffee. He just held the cup while watching me clean the counter. One early morning, a truck driver came in and started talking to me near the register. The strange customer stared in that direction the entire time without touching his coffee. When the truck driver left, he commented in a voice far too calm, "Your boyfriend seems older than I imagined." I immediately replied that he wasn't my boyfriend. And he smiled slightly before saying, "Oh, so you still leave alone?" My entire body went cold at that moment. It no longer felt like coincidence or a weird customer. It felt like someone studying my routine long enough to know exactly when I was vulnerable. The following week, I finally told my manager about him. She listened with concern, but in the end basically answered what I already expected. As long as he didn't directly threaten me or do something illegal, there wasn't much they could do. Even so, she promised to review the cameras and ask the security guard at the gas station next door to stay more alert overnight. That calmed me a little at first. But 2 days later, I arrived for my shift and found an empty coffee cup sitting on the employee's counter in the back of the diner. The problem was that customers couldn't access that area. Only employees could go there. I asked the other workers who had left the cup there, and nobody knew. Written on the side of the cup in black marker was my name. That was it, nothing else. I felt a horrible sensation immediately because I instantly recognized his handwriting from the card receipts he sometimes signed. I showed it to my manager, and this time even she looked genuinely disturbed. She said she would start walking me to my car whenever possible. But that same night, shortly after 3 in the morning, the man appeared again as if nothing had happened. He sat in the same place, ordered the same thing, and while I prepared the coffee, he said without looking directly at me, "You should stop involving other people in this." At that point, I was already living in a constant state of anxiety. Every time the diner door opened during the night, my body automatically expected to see him walking in. I started sleeping badly, repeatedly checking cars and traffic and avoiding stopping at empty red lights when driving home after work. Even so, I kept working because I needed the money and honestly didn't want to admit to myself how much it was affecting me. The man kept appearing regularly, but after the comment about involving other people, he became even stranger. He talked less, spent more time simply staring through the window or discreetly watching me while I worked. And then something else started happening. Some nights I noticed his dark sedan parked in different places near the diner, even when he didn't come inside. Sometimes it sat across the street. Other times near the gas station next door with the headlights off. On 2 occasions, I was almost certain I saw the car on the route between the diner and my apartment at sunrise. Never close enough for me to confirm 100%, but enough to leave me paranoid the entire rest of the day. One early morning, I arrived at work and the cook casually commented that my boyfriend had asked whether I had arrived yet. When I asked who he meant, he described the black coffee customer exactly. A freezing sensation ran through my body so hard that I had to sit down behind the counter for a few seconds. After that, I seriously considered quitting. My manager agreed the situation was becoming far too strange and suggested temporarily changing my shifts, but that only made everything worse. Because when I started working some earlier shifts, the man simply started showing up earlier too, as if he immediately knew about the change. That's when I realized something that terrified me. He was probably watching the diner even when he wasn't coming inside. Maybe spending hours in the parking lot watching who arrived and left. That Friday business was slower than normal because of a severe storm. It had been raining heavily since overnight, and almost no customers came in after 3 in the morning. My manager left around 4 because she needed to open another location early the next day. So I ended up alone again during the last hours of the shift. The customer appeared shortly afterward, completely soaked from the rain. He sat in his usual spot and silently watched me for almost an entire hour. When he finally stood to pay, he placed the money on the counter and calmly said, "You should park closer to the light when it rains. It's hard to see you getting into your car." At that moment, I literally felt sick, because it meant he watched details like that in the parking lot while I left alone. After he left that night, I stared through the window trying to locate his car in the rain. The front parking lot was nearly empty because of the storm, and the lights reflected across the wet asphalt, making everything blurry. I couldn't identify the dark sedan anywhere. That should have made me feel safer, but it had the opposite effect, because I started thinking maybe he was parked in the back again, or worse, watching the diner from somewhere I couldn't see. I spent the final hour of the shift extremely nervous. I repeatedly checked the doors, reviewed the cameras multiple times, and texted my manager asking if she could come back to walk me to my car. She didn't answer because she was probably already asleep. When it was almost 6 in the morning, I started closing the register with trembling hands. The rain was still pouring outside, and the back parking lot looked completely dark, except for the weak light near the employee door. I grabbed my things, trying to gather the courage to leave quickly. Before opening the door, I spent several seconds staring through the small window, trying to see something outside, and that's when I saw a car parked in the darkest corner of the lot with no headlights on. His sedan. I recognized the shape immediately and the small sticker on the rear window. My heart started pounding so hard that I felt dizzy. I stood inside the diner for maybe 2 full minutes trying to decide what to do. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? A customer is sitting in the parking lot. It still felt insufficient. I also thought about waiting longer, but I just wanted to get out of that place. The heavy rain hammered against the metal roof in the back, and the parking lot seemed empty, besides that dark car sitting near the fence. Eventually, I took a deep breath, held my keys between my fingers the way I had been doing for weeks, and hurried out through the employee door. The freezing rain soaked through my jacket almost immediately while I walked toward my car. The sedan remained completely motionless in the dark. I couldn't see anyone inside. I tried not to look directly at it while unlocking my car, but I could feel that presence in the parking lot the entire time. I got into the driver's seat too quickly, slammed the door shut, and immediately hit the automatic lock. My heart was pounding at an insane level while I inserted the key into the ignition, and that was the exact moment I heard breathing behind me. Slow, coming from the back seat. My entire body froze instantly. Before I even fully turned my head, I recognized that heavy breathing because I had heard it many times while he stood near the diner counter for hours. Then a low voice spoke from the darkness behind me. "I knew you'd still leave alone." I have never felt fear so immediate and physical in my life as I did in that moment inside the car. My whole body locked up. I remember holding the key in the ignition, unable to even fully turn my head. The breathing came from right behind my right shoulder, too close. The smell of old coffee and wet clothes filled the entire car. My brain entered a strange state where everything felt slow. The rain pounding against the roof, the unmoving windshield wipers, my own shallow breathing, and that calm voice behind me as if everything happening was completely normal. I don't know exactly how I managed to react, but I think it was pure instinct. I let out an enormous scream and threw my body forward while slamming on the horn with all my strength. The sound exploded through the silent parking lot in a deafening way. Immediately, I heard violent movement in the back seat. The man cursed under his breath and tried grabbing my arm over the seat, but I kept pressing the horn non-stop while kicking the door trying to open it. The car was automatically locked, and my hands were shaking so badly that it took several seconds to hit the unlock switch correctly. When I finally got the door open, I practically threw myself out into the rain. I slipped on the wet asphalt and fell to my knees, but I kept screaming. And then I saw him quickly climbing out of the back seat through the opposite side of the car. That image of him in the rain still comes back to me sometimes. The same soaked dark jacket, the same low baseball cap, except now much closer than I had ever seen him before. He looked directly at me for a full second while the horn continued blaring non-stop behind him. And the worst part was the calm expression on his face. He didn't look panicked about being discovered. He looked irritated that I had reacted differently than expected. Then he simply ran toward the dark sedan parked at the edge of the lot. I kept screaming while trying to back away from my car. The diner's back door opened almost immediately after because the cook had heard the continuous horn. By the time he ran outside to see what was happening, the man was already getting into his own car. The sedan sped away so fast across the wet parking lot that it nearly hit the side fence before disappearing onto the road. I spent the next several minutes shaking so badly that I could barely speak to the police when they arrived. They found clear, muddy footprints on the back seat of my car and an empty travel mug lying on the floor behind the passenger seat. The worst part came later when they checked the exterior security cameras. They discovered he had entered my car almost 40 minutes before I left the diner. He had stayed hidden there in the dark, waiting for me to get inside alone. I quit that same day. I also moved out of my apartment a few weeks later. I never saw that man in person again, but for a very long time afterward, every time I got into a car at night, my first instinct was to immediately check the back seat before closing the door. Story 2. I was 16 years old when this happened to me in a small town outside Indianapolis. My routine back then was extremely predictable. I woke up early, caught the school bus at 6:40 in the morning, and got home around 4 in the afternoon. It was just me, my mom, and my younger brother living on a quiet residential street full of identical houses and huge trees. My mom worked early shifts at a hospital, so most days I left alone to wait for the bus at the main corner of the neighborhood. The bus stop was near a small pharmacy and a relatively busy intersection. There were always the same students waiting there every morning. Younger kids, sleepy teenagers, and a few parents dropping off their children before work. For a long time, nothing strange ever happened at that bus stop. It was literally the most ordinary part of my day, until I started noticing a man repeatedly appearing across the street. The first time I didn't think much of it. It was just a guy standing near the pharmacy wearing a dark coat and a cap, looking toward the bus stop. I thought maybe he was waiting for someone or heading to work early. The problem was realizing he appeared again the next day, and the next one after that, always at the same time, always across the street discreetly watching the students. At first I tried to ignore it because it felt paranoid to be suspicious of someone just for standing on the sidewalk. But as the days passed, I started noticing strange patterns. He never used a phone, never smoked, never went into the pharmacy, and never talked to anyone. He just stood there looking toward the bus stop until the bus arrived. He was probably around 40 years old, thin, short beard, and always wore dark clothes even when the weather got warmer. And there was one specific thing about the way he watched the bus stop that started bothering me a lot. He didn't look like someone casually observing street traffic. He looked far too attentive, like he was tracking specific people. Sometimes I caught him staring directly at me for way too long before quickly looking away. I mentioned him to a school friend once, and she said he was probably just some guy waiting for a ride to work. I tried believing that too, but then I started noticing something else. After the bus arrived and we boarded, the man never left immediately. He kept standing there watching the bus drive away, and sometimes when I looked through the window as the bus made the first turns through the neighborhood, I could see him walking along the sidewalk following the same direction as the bus for several blocks. The first time it truly scared me was on a rainy Wednesday near the beginning of winter. The bus was emptier than usual because many students stayed home that day. I sat by the window like always, and when the bus pulled away from the stop, I automatically looked back, searching for the man. He was walking along the sidewalk across the street following the bus again. But this time I kept watching longer, and I realized he sped up or slowed down depending on the bus's speed and traffic. When the bus stopped at a red light, he stopped too. When the bus moved again, he kept walking. It didn't feel like coincidence. My stomach twisted instantly. Even so, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he simply worked somewhere in that direction. But then something worse happened. The bus stopped several blocks later to pick up more students, and when I looked through the window again, he was still there, walking in the same direction, staring at the bus. Not looking at traffic, not looking at a phone, at the bus. And at that moment, I got the very clear feeling that he was specifically following someone inside. Maybe me, maybe another girl, but someone. After that day, I started obsessively watching him every morning, and the more I observed him, the stranger he seemed. He never missed a day. Didn't matter if it was cold, raining, or foggy. He always appeared around 6:30 on the opposite side of the street. Some mornings he arrived even before the students. Once I saw him standing alone in the dark on the sidewalk while the sun was barely rising. That instantly gave me a horrible feeling. I also started noticing he seemed to know exactly where I usually stood at the bus stop. Even when I changed positions near the other students, eventually I would notice his eyes focused in my direction. I told my mom about him one night during dinner, and she tried not to scare me. She said he was probably just some strange guy from the neighborhood, but told me never to wait for the bus alone if I could avoid it. For a few days, she started driving me to the bus stop and waiting with me. The man still appeared anyway, except he never looked directly while my mom was nearby. He stayed farther away, pretending to watch traffic. The problem was that my mom couldn't keep doing that forever because of work, and as soon as I started waiting for the bus alone again, he began acting strange once more. One specific morning, I clearly heard him quietly say good morning while I crossed near the pharmacy. He had never spoken to me before. I didn't even look at him. I just kept walking toward the stop with my heart racing. After that, I completely avoided looking in his direction. I arrived at the stop and stared at my phone, pretending to be distracted until the bus appeared. Even so, I could still feel when he was watching. It was that constant, uncomfortable sensation that makes you aware of your own body all the time. Without realizing it, I started changing small habits. I picked different seats on the bus, switched sides near the windows, and sometimes even got off a few minutes earlier at school just to discreetly check whether he appeared somewhere nearby. The problem was that the more I tried ignoring him, the more present he seemed. One morning, the bus was almost 15 minutes late because of snow. Most of the students started complaining, and some parents returned to their cars to wait inside. The man stayed standing across the street the entire time without showing cold or impatience, just watching. At one point, our eyes met for a few seconds, and I felt an intense chill through my body because he smiled slightly. Not a friendly smile. A smile too small, too strange, like someone satisfied about finally being noticed. I immediately looked away and counted the seconds until the bus arrived. When I got on the bus that morning, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my pass on the floor. Things started getting worse after school, too. The stop where I got off was several blocks from my house on a residential avenue that stayed relatively empty during the afternoon. One day, while walking home listening to music, I suddenly felt like I was being watched and automatically looked across the street. The man was there, walking in the same direction as me several yards behind. My heart literally exploded in my chest at that moment. I quickly crossed the street, pretending I needed to check something at a small store near the corner. When I looked again, he had crossed to the same side too. He wasn't running or trying to talk to me, just walking very slowly while watching me. I practically ran the final blocks home that day. When I got inside and locked the door, I stood by the living room window waiting to see him pass. A few seconds later, he appeared calmly walking down the sidewalk in front of my house without directly looking at the windows. And that scared me more than any obvious pursuit, because it felt far too calculated, like he knew exactly how far he could go without causing an immediate reaction. That night, I told my mom everything, and this time she became genuinely worried. She said she would start picking me up from school whenever possible, and told me never to walk home alone again. For a few days, my mom really did pick me up after school, and that gave me some relief. The man still appeared at the bus stop in the mornings, but I felt less vulnerable, knowing I wouldn't have to walk home alone afterward. Even so, the situation started affecting my mind in a bad way. I constantly looked through the school windows, scanning parking lots and people on the street, trying to identify that dark coat in every crowd. My friends started noticing something was wrong with me. I slept badly, startled easily, and avoided staying out after school. One morning, while we waited for the bus, a boy from my neighborhood jokingly mentioned that the pharmacy guy was there again. That instantly froze me because it meant other people had noticed him too. I casually asked if anyone knew who he was, but nobody had any idea. One of the boys even said the guy appeared way too early to seem like someone heading to work. And honestly, hearing someone else confirm that made me feel worse, not better. That same morning, while the bus pulled away from the stop, I looked through the window and noticed the man staring directly at the vehicle again. But this time he did something different. He slowly raised his hand and subtly pointed in my direction through the glass before beginning to walk down the sidewalk like always. After that, I seriously started thinking about completely changing my routine. I even wanted to skip school for a few days just to avoid going near the bus stop. But my mom kept saying we couldn't let a stranger control our lives like that. She tried handling everything rationally. She called the school, spoke with the bus driver, and even talked to a police officer she knew in the area. The problem was that nobody could really do much because technically the man hadn't committed a crime. He's just standing on the street, was basically what they said. And that made me desperate because it felt like everyone was waiting for something worse to happen before taking it seriously. That Friday, it started raining heavily during the afternoon. My mom texted me saying she might be late picking me up because the hospital was overcrowded. I immediately became nervous because I didn't want to return alone to the bus stop. I ended up getting on the bus anyway, trying to convince myself I was exaggerating everything. During the ride, I stared out the window the entire time looking for the man on nearby streets. I didn't see anyone resembling him. As the bus approached my normal stop, I had a sudden impulsive idea. I decided to get off 2 stops early to test something. I wanted to know whether the man was really following me, or whether I was falling into complete paranoia. In my mind, this would finally prove everything was coincidence. So I pulled the cord before my usual stop and got off on a different street I normally never used. The moment I stepped off the bus, I instantly regretted the decision. The rain was light but steady, and that street was much emptier than I imagined. There were only a few old houses, a closed laundromat, and a small market on the corner. The bus left far too quickly, leaving me practically alone there. My plan was simple: walk several blocks using a different route and prove to myself nobody would be waiting for me. But the moment I turned toward the sidewalk, my entire body went cold. The man was already there, standing beneath the awning of the closed market, staring directly at the exact spot where I would step off the bus. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look like someone who saw me by chance. He looked like he had literally been waiting in that exact place. I remember perfectly the feeling of my stomach dropping because I immediately realized something. He already knew I would get off there before the bus even stopped. My whole body entered survival mode. The man slowly started walking toward me as soon as the bus disappeared around the corner. Not running, not trying to attract attention, just calmly walking with his hands in his pockets while watching me. And that was far worse than any obvious chase because it felt too calculated. I started walking quickly in the opposite direction, trying to act normal, but I could hear his footsteps behind me on the wet sidewalk. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I pulled my phone from my pocket, trying to call my mom while walking, but my hands shook too badly. When I quickly looked over my shoulder, he was still following at the same steady pace. At one point, he said something quietly that I couldn't understand because of the rain and the blood pounding in my ears. I walked faster. Then I heard his footsteps speeding up too. That's when I truly panicked. I ran directly into a small convenience store that was still open near the corner. The bell above the door rang loudly when I stumbled inside. The cashier immediately looked startled because I must have looked completely pale. I stood near the register trying to catch my breath while staring through the front window. The man stopped outside the store beneath the rain, looking directly at me through the glass. He didn't come inside. He just stood there motionless. And the worst part was realizing he was smiling slightly again, like he had finally confirmed something. I called my mom, crying right then, and she immediately left the hospital to pick me up. The man remained standing outside the store for almost 15 full minutes, until a police car slowly drove down the avenue. Only then did he turn around and calmly walk away through the rain without looking back. After that day, my mom completely forbade me from taking the bus alone. For several weeks, she drove me to and from school every day. Even though it practically destroyed her schedule at the hospital, we also officially filed a police report for the first time, because now there was a more concrete stalking situation. The problem was that, again, there was still no direct proof of threats. The officer basically advised me to avoid being alone and call immediately if I saw him again near school or the house. Even so, I remained terrified because the feeling left from that afternoon was horrible. The man didn't seem impulsive. He seemed to know exactly where I would be. For several days, I didn't see him at the bus stop anymore, and that almost convinced me maybe he had given up after the police became involved. But then I started noticing other things. A dark car parked near my street at strange hours. A silhouette standing across the avenue near the school whenever I stayed later for activities. Never close enough for me to confirm completely, but enough to keep me constantly on edge. I started sleeping with the curtains closed and repeatedly checking through the windows before leaving the house. My mom began doing the same thing without even realizing it. I think both of us were already living in that constant silent fear. The worst part happened about a week after the afternoon at the convenience store. It was Saturday and my mom needed to work extra hours at the hospital. My brother was at a friend's house, so I was home alone for the first time since all of this started. I spent the entire day nervous, repeatedly checking doors and windows. Near the beginning of the evening, I heard footsteps slowly passing along the sidewalk in front of our house. It wasn't unusual for people to walk through the neighborhood, but something made me look through a crack in the living room curtain. The man was standing across the street, staring directly at the house. My whole body instantly froze. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending to wait for a bus anymore. He was simply standing there motionless, watching the windows of our house in the early evening. I immediately called my mom while backing away from the window. When I finally looked again a few seconds later, he was still there. And then he did something that still gives me chills to remember. He slowly raised one hand and pointed toward my bedroom window on the second floor. Not toward the entire house, toward my room specifically. The police arrived about 20 minutes later, but he had disappeared again. They never officially discovered who that man was, My mom eventually transferred me to another school a few months later, and we moved the following year. But to this day, whenever I see someone standing near bus stops watching students far too early in the morning, I remember the horrible feeling of stepping off at that different stop and realizing he was already waiting exactly where I would step. Story 3. I was 23 years old when I moved into a small apartment complex in Tucson, Arizona. I had just gotten my first stable job after college and needed a cheap place near the office. The complex was small, only 2 floors and a few apartments spread along exterior hallways. It didn't exactly seem dangerous. It was more the kind of building where nobody really talks much to the neighbors. My apartment was on the 2nd floor at the end of a narrow hallway overlooking the parking lot. The rent was low because the building was old and poorly maintained. The hallway carpet constantly smelled like dust, and the outside lights worked with motion sensors, so they usually turned on automatically whenever someone passed by at night. My routine back then was extremely repetitive. I left early for work, came home around 8 at night, made some quick food, and watched shows until I fell asleep. During the day, the place seemed practically empty. I almost never saw residents coming or going, and that was exactly why I started noticing something strange during the very first week. The apartment next to mine seemed completely silent during the day, but every night I heard movement coming from inside. At first it sounded like the normal routine of someone with an opposite schedule. Light footsteps crossing the apartment, doors opening and closing, sometimes something dragging across the floor. Nothing extremely loud, just enough for me to notice through the thin bedroom wall. But as the days passed, I started noticing a strange pattern. I never saw the neighbor during the day. Never. Not entering, not leaving, not hearing TV or music. The apartment seemed dead until around 1 or 2 in the morning, when the sounds would begin. Slow footsteps, cabinets opening, water running in the bathroom. Some nights it sounded like the person paced repeatedly from one side of the living room to the other for hours. And the more I noticed that, the more I started paying attention to something else that felt weird. Every time I came home late from work and walked down the 2nd floor hallway, the light near the neighboring apartment door turned on immediately. Not the general hallway light, the specific light above his door, as if someone was standing right behind it waiting for the sensor to activate when I passed by. The first time I thought it was coincidence, but then it started happening almost every night. I would climb the stairs, turn into the hallway, and the light above the neighboring apartment would turn on the exact moment I approached my own door. At first I tried convincing myself it was just paranoia caused by living alone in that building. Old motion sensors activate over anything. Maybe a cat walking past, wind, any small detail. But after a few weeks I started noticing things that were hard to ignore. The light never turned on while I walked through the rest of the hallway. Only near that specific apartment door, and almost always a few seconds before I reached it. As if someone was approaching the door from inside exactly when I climbed the stairs. Several nights I intentionally slowed my pace trying to test it. Even then the light turned on at the exact same moment. Another strange thing was the immediate silence afterward. I would hear footsteps or movement inside the apartment while walking down the hallway, and the moment the light turned on, everything stopped. Absolutely everything. As if the person inside heard me arriving and froze while waiting for me to enter my apartment. That started making me genuinely uncomfortable, especially because I never managed to see the neighbor. Not once. The apartment next door stayed closed all day long, curtains always shut, no sound from inside until the middle of the night. One night I came home later than usual after going out drinking with coworkers. It was probably almost 1 in the morning when I walked up to the 2nd floor. The hallway was empty and silent except for the faint hum of the outside lights. As I approached my apartment, I clearly heard footsteps coming from inside the neighboring apartment. Slow, back and forth. Then the light above his door turned on exactly like it always did, except this time something different happened. I heard the soft sound of a doorknob turning from inside. My heart instantly started racing. The door didn't open fully, only a few inches, just enough for a narrow, dark crack to appear. I froze immediately, trying to act normal while searching for my keys in my purse. I couldn't see anyone through the opening because the inside of the apartment was completely dark. Even so, I had the very clear feeling that someone was watching me through that crack while I unlocked my own door. I entered too quickly and locked it immediately. Then I spent maybe 2 full minutes staring through the peephole. The neighbor's door remained slightly open, but nobody came out. And the worst part was the absolute silence in the hallway, as if the person on the other side was standing still listening too. After that night, I started avoiding coming home late alone whenever I could. Even so, my work schedule practically forced me to return after 8 or 9 most days, and every time I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my body automatically anticipated the light turning on near his door. It started exhausting me in a strange way. It felt like living constantly observed without being able to prove anything concrete. I tried casually mentioning the neighbor to an older woman who lived downstairs, asking if she knew the guy from the apartment next to mine. She answered something that immediately made me uncomfortable. She said she almost never saw that resident during the day either. According to her, he seemed like someone who only existed at night. I thought the phrase sounded way too strange, but I kept listening. She mentioned that sometimes she heard the parking gate opening very late at night, around 3 or 4 in the morning, as if he only left during those hours. I asked if she knew his name, and she said she had no idea. She couldn't even remember seeing him when she first moved into the building months earlier. After that conversation, I started noticing smaller details in the hallway, things I had ignored before, like the fact that there was always a shadow visible beneath his apartment door during the night, even when no light seemed to be on inside, or the way the footsteps stopped instantly whenever I got close. One night, I was returning from the grocery store carrying 2 heavy bags when I dropped my keys in the hallway. It made a relatively loud noise in the silence of the building. The exact second the keys hit the floor, I heard rapid movement on the other side of the neighboring apartment wall. Quick footsteps rushing toward the door. And then the light above his door turned on once again. My heart started pounding immediately. I bent down quickly to grab my keys, trying to ignore it, but when I stood up, I noticed his door was slightly open again. This time more than before, enough for me to see part of the dark hallway inside. And that was when an intense chill ran through my body, because I could clearly tell someone was standing behind the door watching through the crack. I couldn't properly see the face, only part of an eye reflecting the hallway light for less than a second before the door slowly closed. I practically ran into my apartment that night. I was so nervous I started repeatedly checking the door locks and windows before trying to sleep. And while I lay in bed attempting to calm down, I heard footsteps outside in the hallway, slow, stopping directly in front of my door, then silence. A silence so complete that I started hearing my own breathing inside the apartment. I stayed frozen in bed for several minutes listening to that silence outside. No footsteps walking away. No sound of the neighboring apartment door opening. Just that horrible feeling that someone was standing right outside my door listening to every movement I made. I don't think I had ever been so aware of the tiny sounds inside my own home. The ceiling fan, the blanket fabric moving when I shifted, my short breathing. At some point, I finally heard a soft step in the hallway, followed by the outside light turning off again. Only then did I relax slightly. The next day I went to work exhausted because I had barely slept. I spent the entire day wondering if I was exaggerating everything in my own head. After all, technically that neighbor had never spoken to me or tried direct contact. He just seemed too present. Even so, I started creating small paranoid habits. I checked through the peephole before leaving the apartment. Waited several seconds listening to the hallway before opening the door. And every time I got home, I automatically checked whether the light above his door turned on. The worst part was that it kept happening every single night without fail, as if someone knew exactly when I was arriving. On Friday of that week, something happened that completely changed how I saw the situation. I got off work early because the company system crashed during the afternoon. Normally I came home after 8, but that day I climbed the apartment stairs a little after 5:30. There was still sunlight partially entering the exterior hallway. And immediately I noticed something strange. The neighboring apartment door was partially open, not a few inches like before, open enough for me to see part of the living room inside. My entire body went on alert instantly. The hallway was empty and silent. No sounds coming from the apartment. I immediately thought about ignoring it and quickly entering my own apartment. But something made me look through the opening as I passed. Maybe stupid curiosity, maybe weeks of accumulated anxiety. And it was the worst decision I could have made. Because right near the living room entrance, there were several photographs spread across a small table near the couch. Printed photographs, many of them. And it took me less than 2 seconds to realize every single one was of me. I immediately recognized my clothes, my backpack, my face. Some pictures showed me climbing the apartment stairs. Others showed me entering the parking lot. Some were clearly taken from far away in the second-floor hallway without me realizing. My stomach dropped so violently I instantly felt sick. I stood completely frozen, staring through the open door, while my brain tried processing what I was seeing. The photographs were spread messily across the table, as if someone had been looking through them recently. And there weren't just a few. There had to be dozens, some printed on regular paper, others clearly developed with higher quality. I recognized specific moments from the past few weeks. A picture of me carrying grocery bags through the parking lot. Another entering the building wearing gym clothes. One even taken from the hallway while I searched through my purse for my keys in front of my own apartment door. The worst part was noticing the angles. Many had been taken from inside the apartment complex itself, in places where someone would have needed to hide while watching me. My heart started pounding so hard I could literally hear blood rushing in my ears. I slowly stepped backward without taking my eyes off the open door. And then I heard a sound coming from deeper inside the apartment, a short dull noise, like someone bumping into something in the interior hallway. My entire body went ice cold immediately, because that meant there was probably someone inside while I was staring at those photos. I didn't think about confirming anything else. I just turned and practically ran toward my apartment. My hands shook so badly while trying to fit the key into the lock that I dropped it twice on the hallway floor. The entire time I had the horrible feeling that someone could come rushing out of that apartment behind me at any second. When I finally got inside and locked the door, I immediately ran to the peephole. The neighboring apartment door remained open in the exact same position. No visible movement. Nobody stepping out. But I knew what I had seen. I called the police, practically crying while continuing to stare through the peephole without blinking. I don't think I had ever felt so much fear mixed with adrenaline in my life. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart nearly stopped because I thought it was him coming out of the apartment, but it was two police officers climbing the stairs. As soon as they arrived, I quickly explained about the photos in the open apartment. They approached the neighbor's door and called out several times before entering. I watched everything through the peephole. The officers spent several minutes inside without saying anything. Then one of them came back into the hallway and called me over to talk. The apartment was empty. No person. Only a mattress on the bedroom floor, photography equipment scattered around, and dozens of photographs of me stored inside boxes and folders. Some had clearly been taken through the apartment windows at night. Others were from weeks before I had even started noticing that neighbor. The officers spent over an hour inside the apartment that night. While they searched the place, I sat on the hallway stairs trying to stop trembling. One officer asked how long I had been noticing strange behavior from the neighbor, and while explaining about the light turning on, the nighttime footsteps, and the door slowly opening, I started realizing how insane the whole thing truly sounded. The worst part was when they began showing me some of the photographs they found. There were pictures of me during moments and times I didn't even remember anymore. Photos of me entering the building carrying food, taking out the trash at night. One even taken through the side window of the apartment laundry room while I folded clothes. Some were clearly taken from very close range without me noticing, and there were handwritten notes on the back of many of them. Schedules, days of the week. Things like arrives tired on Thursdays, usually stays awake after midnight, and uses hallway alone. I felt genuinely nauseous reading that, because it meant the man had probably been obsessively studying my routine for a very long time. The officers also found a notebook full of similar notes about other residents in the building, but almost everything related to me was far more detailed. When I asked who the man from the apartment was, one officer said they were still trying to officially identify him because the lease was under someone else's name. That night I couldn't stay alone in the apartment under any circumstances. A friend from work picked me up and I slept at her place the entire weekend. The police recommended I not return alone to the building until they found the resident. And honestly, after seeing those photographs, I couldn't even imagine walking down that hallway again without panicking. The problem was that the man simply disappeared. The police discovered he paid rent in cash through an intermediary, and almost nobody in the building knew his real name. Some exterior security cameras showed him leaving the complex only hours before I arrived home early that afternoon, as if he had sensed something or simply left during a normal routine. They never figured it out for sure. I spent the following weeks extremely paranoid. Every unfamiliar person on the street seemed suspicious. Every time I heard footsteps behind me, I automatically remembered those sounds in the hallway during the night. I moved out of the apartment less than 2 weeks later. And honestly, I think the worst part wasn't even the photographs themselves. It was realizing that during all that time when I felt watched in the hallway, I truly was being watched, and that there had probably been someone standing behind that partially open door, staring at me long before I ever started noticing anything at all. Story 4. I was 28 years old when this happened to me in Sacramento, California. I lived alone in a small apartment near downtown and worked practically all day at a dental clinic. My routine back then was extremely predictable. Work gym twice a week and grocery shopping on Sunday nights. The grocery store was only a few blocks from my apartment, so I always walked there. It was one of those smaller neighborhood markets, not very crowded, where the employees eventually recognize regular customers after a while. That was exactly why I liked it. It felt calmer and more familiar than large supermarkets. I also always bought basically the same things: coffee, fruit, frozen meals, yogurt, sparkling water, and some cleaning products. At first, everything seemed completely normal. The cashiers were polite, the aisles were usually empty at night, and I finished my shopping quickly before heading back home. It was about 2 months after I started going there regularly that I began noticing one specific employee. He worked stocking products in different sections and always seemed to be nearby whenever I showed up. The first time I noticed him, I thought it was coincidence. Small market, few employees, no big deal. But as the weeks passed, I started realizing he appeared around me way too often. He was probably in his mid-30s, tall, thin, and always wore the same dark blue store uniform. At first, he never did anything directly creepy. He just seemed too attentive. Sometimes I'd turn into an aisle looking for something and he'd already be there stocking shelves. Other times I'd grab an item from a shelf and catch him glancing at me before pretending to continue working. Honestly, I tried ignoring it for a long time because it felt ridiculous to distrust an employee just for being in the same market as me. But then the strange comments started. One night I was choosing coffee when he walked past pushing boxes and casually said, "You finally switched from that strong brand you used to buy." I remember exactly how I felt hearing that because he had never checked me out at the register. We didn't even normally talk, and yet he knew which coffee brand I used to buy. I gave an uncomfortable laugh and answered something random just to end the conversation. A few days later, it happened again. I was grabbing sparkling water when he commented, "I thought you stopped buying the lemon flavor." That time, I felt a real chill in my stomach, because it meant he had been watching my purchases long enough to notice small changes in my routine. After that, I started paying attention to him much more than I wanted to. And the more I paid attention, the stranger everything seemed. No matter what section of the store I was in, eventually he would appear nearby. Sometimes stocking boxes, other times pretending to check labels or pushing a stocking cart. The worst part was that he never seemed surprised to run into me in the aisles. It was like he already knew exactly where I would be. One night I went to the market later than usual because I had just left the gym. The place was almost empty around 10 at night. While I was picking fruit, I heard his voice behind me calmly commenting, "You usually come earlier on Sundays." My entire body immediately tensed. I turned around too quickly and he was standing a few feet away holding a box of apples like it was casual conversation. That time I didn't answer at all. I just grabbed my things and went to the checkout. While I waited for my groceries to be scanned, I noticed him standing at the end of the aisle, staring in my direction without really hiding it. That was the first time I felt real fear in that market, not discomfort. Actual fear, because it was starting to feel less like coincidence and more like constant observation of my routine. The following week, I tried changing my schedule to avoid him. I went early on a Tuesday before work instead of Sunday night. He still appeared, this time in the frozen foods aisle. When he saw me, he smiled slightly and said, "I thought you didn't come in the mornings anymore." That chilled me in an unbelievable way because it meant he had noticed not only my purchases, but my specific shopping hours. After that, I started feeling anxious before even entering the store. Every time I grabbed a cart, I automatically started searching the aisles for the dark blue uniform. During some visits, I managed to avoid eye contact entirely, but eventually he always appeared somewhere. And then the comments became more personal. One day, he asked if I was still going to the gym after work because I looked more tired lately. Another time, he commented that I probably lived nearby because I never carried enough bags for someone who drives. The worst part was his calm tone, like he was just making innocent conversation while showing he knew way too many details about my life. I thought several times about complaining to management, but part of me still felt ridiculous for being so disturbed by something that seemed small. The situation really started getting worse when I realized he appeared in aisles where it made absolutely no sense for him to be working. One night I went to the feminine products section in the back of the store to buy pads. It was an area where I rarely saw employees. While choosing a package, I heard a stocking cart stop behind me. When I turned around, he was there again. Not stocking products, not arranging shelves, just standing there holding the empty cart and glancing in my direction before pretending to straighten random boxes. My stomach immediately dropped. I grabbed the product and walked away quickly without looking back. As I moved into another aisle, I heard the cart moving behind me again. Not running, just matching my pace a few feet behind. That night I left without finishing my shopping because my entire body was in fight or flight mode, and for the first time I seriously started wondering if I was being followed outside the market too. While walking back to my apartment, I kept looking behind me in the reflection of store windows trying to see if someone was walking the same direction. I didn't see anyone. Even so, I kept that horrible feeling until I locked my apartment door. After that, I started shopping at another grocery store farther away, even though it was inconvenient. I spent almost 2 weeks without entering that neighborhood market. And honestly, I started feeling better. I slept less anxiously, stopped thinking about it as much, and almost convinced myself I had exaggerated the whole situation in my head. But then I had to go back one Thursday night because it was the only nearby place still open at that hour. The moment I entered the market and saw him at the end of the aisle was enough to make my entire body tense again. And the worst part was realizing he recognized me immediately too. He didn't seem surprised I had disappeared for weeks. Actually, he smiled slightly and said while carrying boxes, "You took a while to come back." That made me freeze because it sounded exactly like someone noticing the absence of a routine. I tried finishing my shopping as quickly as possible, while avoiding any aisle where he appeared. But at one point, while grabbing frozen food, I heard his voice very close to me calmly asking, "Did you get sick or did you just start shopping at the market on Jefferson Avenue?" My heart literally stopped at that moment, because the market on Jefferson Avenue was exactly where I had started shopping during the last few weeks. And I had never mentioned that to anyone. Right then I felt a horrible physical sensation, like my whole body had suddenly gone cold. I remember just staring at him without being able to answer. The employee kept looking at me for a few seconds with that unnaturally calm expression before pushing the cart away down the aisle, as if he hadn't said anything strange at all. I stood frozen near the frozen foods trying to process what I had just heard, because there was no normal explanation for him knowing where I shopped now, unless he had been watching me outside that market too. At that moment, I abandoned half the things in my cart and went straight to the checkout. While waiting for my groceries to be scanned, I constantly looked through the aisles expecting him to appear again, and he did. He stood near the exit organizing empty boxes while discreetly watching me through the reflection in the front glass windows of the market. I left too quickly that night and practically speed-walked all the way back to my apartment. During the entire walk, I felt the constant sensation that someone was behind me, even though I couldn't hear clear footsteps. When I got home, I immediately locked the door and stood staring through the living room window for several minutes trying to see if anyone had followed me. I didn't see anyone. Even so, I slept terribly that entire night. The next day, I told my friend Lauren everything at work, and for the first time saying it out loud, I realized how wrong everything actually sounded. She insisted I report him to the store manager immediately and stop going there completely. I agreed I would do that over the weekend. But that same night, something happened that made me genuinely panic. I got home around 9 after work and immediately noticed a grocery bag leaning against my apartment door. My heart dropped instantly. The bag had the exact logo of the market where he worked. At first I thought maybe a neighbor had left it there by mistake, but when I picked it up I saw my apartment number written on a sticker label. I carried the bag inside with shaking hands, and when I looked inside I felt like I was going to throw up. It contained products I regularly bought. The same coffee brand, the same yogurt, lemon sparkling water, specific frozen meals I usually bought almost every week, except I hadn't purchased any of those things that day. And the worst part was immediately realizing something else. Some of those items were exactly the products I had picked up and then put back on the shelves before abandoning my cart the night before. I stood in the middle of the kitchen staring at that bag for several minutes, unable to think clearly. My whole body was trembling. It wasn't just the fact that someone had left it at my door. It was realizing how closely that person knew my routine in terrifying detail. The products weren't generic. They were the exact brands I always bought. The same coffee, the same sparkling water flavor, even the same protein bars I bought after the gym. and knowing some of the items came directly from the cart I abandoned in the market the night before made it even worse, because it meant he had probably watched everything while I shopped, saw me leave nervously, and then collected the exact products I left behind. My first reaction was calling Lauren, almost crying. She panicked immediately and told me to call the police right away, but while I was on the phone with her, something happened that still gives me chills remembering it. I heard a soft noise in the apartment hallway outside, slow footsteps passing in front of my door. My heart instantly started racing. I froze completely while holding the phone as the footsteps stopped directly outside my apartment. Then silence, no knock, no voice, just absolute silence in the hallway. I slowly approached the door, trying not to make noise, and looked through the peephole. Nobody was visible in the hallway, but the automatic hallway light was still on, meaning someone had passed by only seconds earlier. I called the police immediately after that. While waiting for the patrol car, I sat on the kitchen floor, constantly staring at the door and windows. My brain was trying to connect everything at once. The fact that he knew my schedule, my products, my new grocery store, my apartment, and especially how he had figured out exactly where I lived. When the officers arrived, one of them examined the grocery bag while the other asked questions about the market employee. I explained everything from the beginning, including the strange comments and how he kept appearing in specific aisles. They took the bag as evidence and recommended I stop going to that market immediately. They also asked whether I had noticed anyone following me home recently. Honestly, I had no idea. Maybe he had been doing it for a long time without me realizing. The next day, I went to the market with the police to speak to management. And that was when I discovered the worst part. The employee hadn't worked there for almost 2 weeks. According to the manager, he had recently been fired after another customer complained that he seemed obsessed with her routine inside the store. Even so, somehow he continued entering the market without attracting attention. After that conversation with management, I practically entered a constant state of paranoia. Knowing he didn't even work there anymore and still kept appearing in the aisles made everything much worse, because it meant he was probably going to the market solely to watch me. The police requested access to the security cameras and found footage of him wandering around the store multiple times, even while off duty. In several recordings, he was clearly following me from aisle to aisle at a distance while pretending to browse products. When I saw that footage, I felt physically sick, because it confirmed I hadn't exaggerated anything. In one video, you could even see him taking the exact products I had left in the cart before running out of the store that last night. The police officially opened a case and recommended I completely change my routine temporarily. Lauren insisted I stay at her apartment for a few days, and I immediately agreed. Honestly, I no longer felt safe staying alone in my apartment knowing he knew where I lived. I spent the following days constantly looking over my shoulder in public, avoiding walking alone, and repeatedly checking whether anyone followed me by car after work. My entire body felt trapped in a permanent state of alertness, and the worst part was not knowing where he was now. 4 nights after the grocery bag incident, the final thing happened that made me leave that apartment for good. I had returned quickly to grab more clothes because I needed to work early the next day. Lauren waited in the car while I went upstairs to the apartment. The moment I stepped out of the elevator, I immediately noticed a strong smell of coffee coming from the hallway. My heart started racing instantly because I recognized the specific aroma of the brand I always bought. As I approached my door, I saw another grocery bag from the market sitting on the floor. Except this time there was a hot cup of coffee beside it. Still hot, steam rising from it. That meant someone had left it there only minutes earlier. My entire body froze. Then I heard a soft sound coming from the far end of the hallway, a small metal stocking cart squeaking slowly. When I looked in that direction, I saw him standing near the emergency exit wearing the old blue market uniform and holding an empty stocking cart. The distance between us was too short now. For the first time, I could clearly see his face without aisles or shelves between us. And the worst part was the complete calmness in his expression, as if everything happening was perfectly normal. He simply lifted the coffee cup slightly in my direction and quietly said, "You forgot to take it yesterday." I just ran, I didn't answer. I ran down the stairs so fast I almost fell. I got into Lauren's car crying and unable to speak properly while she sped out of the parking lot. I never returned to that apartment alone again, and to this day, whenever a stranger casually comments on too many details about my routine, I immediately remember that hallway smelling like fresh coffee and the calm way he stood there watching me from the far end of it. Story 5. I started driving for a rideshare app in Dallas, Texas after I lost my job during a major round of layoffs at the company where I worked. At first it was just temporary to pay rent, but I ended up spending almost an entire year doing it. I mainly drove during the night because the demand was better and the pay was higher. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday early mornings usually made good money because of bars, airports, and people coming back from parties. Over time, I got used to all kinds of strange passengers. Drunk people, couples arguing, people who got into the car without saying a single word. After a few months, you practically stop being surprised. My routine was simple. I started around 8 at night and drove until 4 or 5 in the morning. I especially liked short rides downtown because they were quick and relatively safe. Even so, there were certain hours during the night when the city felt different. Streets that were too empty, gas stations with barely any people around, and that constant feeling that anything strange could happen when you're alone inside a car with strangers. I always tried to trust my instincts when accepting rides late at night, and honestly, if I could go back to that specific night, I would have canceled the ride immediately the moment I saw the passenger getting into the car. It was almost 2:30 in the morning when I accepted a pickup request near an avenue farther away from the downtown area. The app showed a short ride, about 10 minutes to a nearby residential neighborhood. It looked simple. When I arrived at the pickup point, I saw a man standing alone near a closed commercial building. The place was practically empty besides a distant gas station on the corner. He got into the back seat without saying good evening or anything. He was probably around 40 years old, thin, short dark hair, wearing a heavy coat even though it wasn't that cold. As soon as he got in, I immediately noticed a strange smell inside the car. Not alcohol or cigarettes, more like old clothes and dampness. I asked to confirm the ride name, and he answered very quietly without looking directly at me. I started driving, following the GPS normally. The problem was that less than 5 minutes into the ride, the app showed a destination change. At first I thought it was normal because passengers change routes all the time, but the new destination was only a few blocks farther than the original one. When I asked if everything was okay, he calmly replied, "Just keep driving." The way he said it gave me an immediate discomfort that's hard to explain. He didn't sound like someone casually adjusting a ride. He sounded like someone trying to keep the car moving on purpose. I kept driving, trying to act normal, but I started paying closer attention to him through the rearview mirror. The man remained sitting exactly in the middle of the back seat, staring straight ahead. He didn't use his phone, didn't make calls, didn't seem distracted by anything. He just watched the road and sometimes my reflection in the mirror. The silence inside the car became uncomfortable way too fast. Normally, passengers say something, ask about the music, scroll through their phones. He did absolutely nothing. A few minutes later, the app changed the destination again. Another short change, another nearby neighborhood. This time I asked if he was having problems with the app because the GPS kept recalculating. Without hesitation, he answered, "I'll tell you when you can stop." That gave me an instant chill in my stomach because he didn't sound like someone trying to reach a specific place. He sounded like someone trying to prevent the ride from ending. Even so, I kept driving because honestly I didn't want trouble in the middle of the night with a strange passenger sitting behind me. Without even realizing it, I started instinctively choosing busier streets, and the more time passed, the more I noticed something strange. He never looked away from the rearview mirror for very long. Several times our eyes met through the mirror and he kept staring directly at me without any embarrassment. After almost 20 minutes driving around different areas of the city, I started getting genuinely nervous. The app had already recalculated the route 4 times. At one point, I directly asked exactly where he needed to go because the ride was getting strange. The man took a few seconds to answer. Then he said in a voice that was way too calm, "You know quiet streets." He didn't answer my question. He just said that while continuing to watch me through the mirror. My heart started beating harder right then. I tried rationalizing, telling myself maybe he was drunk or mentally unstable, but he didn't seem drunk. He spoke clearly, breathed normally, and seemed extremely aware of everything around him. Another thing started bothering me too. I never heard the sound of his seatbelt clicking when he got into the car. I also never heard normal movement from the back seat during the entire ride. It was like he remained completely motionless the whole time. At one point, I drove through a brighter area near some open restaurants and used the opportunity to quickly look at him better through the mirror. His face looked strange under that light. Too pale. His eyes looked too sunken in, and there was something about the way he sat that felt rigid, like his entire body had been stuck in that unnaturally straight posture for far too long. At that point, I had already decided I needed to end the ride somehow. The problem was finding a safe way to do it without upsetting someone clearly strange sitting behind me in the middle of the night. I kept driving through busier avenues, trying to keep my voice calm while asking again exactly where he wanted to stop. This time he answered immediately. Not yet, that was all. Then he started asking questions about me. He asked how long I had been driving at night, if I always worked alone, if I usually picked up rides in isolated neighborhoods. The way he asked sounded overly casual, but every question made me more uncomfortable because they felt way too specific. I answered as little as possible, trying to keep the conversation neutral. At one point, I mentioned that I normally avoided empty areas during the night. He stayed silent for a few seconds before quietly replying, "Even so, you accepted picking me up." That made my entire body go on alert. The car felt smaller with every passing minute. The air inside felt heavy and hot, despite the air conditioning running. And the worst part was the constant sensation of being watched through the rearview mirror nonstop. Several times I thought about simply pulling over and telling him to get out of the car. But something in my instincts told me not to stop in an empty place with that man. Shortly after 3 in the morning, I started noticing something else strange. The app showed the ride duration increasing far more than it should have. We had already been driving almost 40 minutes without any real destination, and the passenger kept changing the endpoint only a few minutes before arrival. At one point, the app even asked if I wanted to confirm the new route, because the changes were excessive. The moment I heard the notification sound, the man quickly said, "Don't end it yet." The speed of his response made me go cold. It felt like he had been watching my phone screen the entire time through the reflection. At that moment, I seriously started considering driving directly to a police station or some extremely crowded area. And that was when something happened that scared me even more. I passed through a bright intersection where I could clearly see the inside of the car reflected in the side window. I glanced instinctively, expecting to see his reflection in the back seat. But for 1 second, I saw nothing behind me except the empty, dark seat. My heart raced so hard I almost missed the avenue entrance. I immediately looked back at the rearview mirror and he was there again, sitting in the same place. Motionless, watching. Maybe it had just been a bad lighting angle. But at that moment, I felt a much stronger fear than before because my brain started realizing something about the situation was deeply wrong. From that point on, the fear felt different. It wasn't just nervousness because of a strange passenger anymore. It felt like my entire brain was trying to tell me I needed to get out of that situation immediately. My hands started sweating on the steering wheel and I had to crack the window open because the car suddenly felt suffocating. The man remained completely motionless in the back seat. Several times I glanced quickly into the mirror, expecting to see any shift in posture, any normal movement from someone who had been sitting inside a car that long. Nothing. Not even his hands moved. Only his eyes following my movements through the mirror. I tried making conversation one more time, asking where he was coming from that night. Without hesitation, he answered, "I just needed to keep driving a little longer." The calm way he said it gave me real chills. Then he added something that instantly made my stomach turn cold. "You drive through the same streets every week. I already recognize your car when it passes." Right then I realized maybe he hadn't chosen me randomly that night. Maybe he had already been watching my schedule before. I kept driving while trying to think quickly about what to do without showing panic. I deliberately started searching for busier parts of the city, places with open gas stations, 24-hour restaurants, and people outside. At one point, the app tried recalculating the route again, but the man didn't immediately change the destination like before. Instead, he stayed silent for several seconds, looking out the window. Then he quietly said, "You're trying to go to crowded places now." My heart pounded so hard I felt pain in my chest, because he had noticed exactly what I was doing. Even so, I kept driving without answering. That was when I decided to stop directly in a brightly lit area, near a crowded 24-hour restaurant full of people leaving bars. The parking lot was busy, with cars coming and going and several people near the entrance. The moment I pulled into a spot beneath the bright lights, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "The ride ends here. You'll need to request another car." For the first time that entire night, the man didn't answer immediately. The silence inside the car became so heavy it almost felt physical. Then I heard a strange sound behind me. Not exactly movement, more like a long, tired sigh coming from the back seat. And at that moment, I finally had the courage to look directly into the rearview mirror again. When I looked into the mirror, I literally felt my entire body freeze. The back seat was empty, completely empty. For 1 second, I thought my brain simply wasn't processing things correctly because of the stress, so I quickly turned my head expecting to see him crouch down or opening the door at that exact moment. There was nobody there. The entire back of the car was empty. My heart started pounding at an insane level, while I frantically looked around trying to understand what had happened. The first thing I thought was that he must have gotten out while I was parking. But then I immediately realized something that completely chilled me. I never heard a door open, or close, and my car made a loud sound every time any door opened because the automatic locks clicked electronically. Besides that, the dashboard warning alarm always went off whenever a door stayed open while the car was running. None of that happened. The man simply wasn't there anymore. Even so, the strong smell of damp clothes and old coffee still lingered in the back seat. I stayed frozen for several seconds trying to breathe while people walked normally outside the restaurant, without imagining what had just happened inside my car. Then I heard a light knock on the passenger side window. I nearly jumped out of the seat looking in that direction. It was a couple asking if I was leaving the parking spot. I tried answering normally, but my voice came out completely broken. I immediately got out of the car in the bright parking lot and checked the back seat again. There was absolutely nobody there. No sign of any door having opened. No movement around the car. Just that strange smell still trapped inside. I spent several minutes walking around the vehicle trying to convince myself the man had simply gotten out quickly without me noticing. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made, because I would have heard it. Or at least seen movement in the mirror. Besides that, when I checked the app, the ride was still active. The destination had been completely removed from the screen. Not canceled, not ended. Just empty, no address at all. I manually ended the ride right then with trembling hands. The app didn't register a passenger rating or payment, as if that account had disappeared too. After that, I sat in that parking lot for almost an hour trying to regain the courage to drive again. I never accepted another ride in that specific area of the city during the night. And to this day, every time I look in the rearview mirror while driving alone at night, there's still a part of me expecting to see that man sitting motionless in the back seat watching without blinking.
Thank you very much for your company until the end. Your support is what gives life to this channel. If these stories have caught you, don't forget to leave your like and comment on your opinion. And if you are not yet part of our community, sign up now to receive the next real horror stories.